Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Hope you are all doing well and staying safe. It's my privilege and pleasure on the behalf of Petro SP Egypt to welcome you here today. My name is Mariam Shreif, and I'm a senior petroleum engineering student at the Lebanese American University, and I'll be moderating today's session. Our webinar today is about bond log basics and interpretation, which will be presented by an outstanding speaker with an extensive experience in cementing and bond log interpretation. So without further ado, our speaker for today is Engineer Kirk Harris. Engineer Harris holds a bachelor degree in civil engineering from Purdue University. He began his career at Halliburton, where he worked as a cementer, operations and research engineer, and finally as a technology manager. Afterwards, Engineer Harris became the global cementing advisor for Occidental Petroleum, Talisman Energy, and Repsol. Currently, he is the technical advisor for Thorough Bond LLC, which provides technical support for cementing and bond log interpretation. Finally, Engineer Harris has been the cementing advisor for the following regions: Asia Pacific, North Sea, Europe, Africa, and Permian Basin, and the Gulf of Mexico. So please help me welcome Engineer Harris. We are delighted to have you here with us today. And as a reminder, if you have any question related to the technical content of the presentation, please feel free to drop it down in the Q&A section, and we will sure try to address as much questions as possible. Now, hope that you will enjoy this session today. And Engineer Harris, the mic is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. It is a privilege to be online with you today. We're going to talk about bond log basics and interpretation. I recognized in the participants, I recognized a couple of names. I recognize Laura Bell and Mustafa. And so I want to say hello to you. I don't know if anyone else is a participant that has joined one of our webinars before, our independent webinars. But it is great to be here, and on behalf of the Arab Oil and Gas Academy, let's begin. The agenda, we're going to talk about the basics, both for the CBL and the ultrasonic. There are tens of tools we could cover for bond log interpretation. These are the main two. And so we'll look at the basics, and then we'll talk not only how the tool works, but the most important thing, and that is how do you read and interpret these things. And we have a process, we call it the 5 C's, and I welcome you now to go for the 6th C, which is a good cup of coffee. The great thing about the bond log is it's an enjoyable process to sit back and relax and read the bond log. And the last thing we'll do, I'll invite you to practice a bond log interpretation with me. Now, the problem is, I wish you were gathered around the desk and we could lay the logs out and we could talk about this and I could hear from you. Sometimes when I do a webinar, I'm just talking to a screen, but I'm still going to ask you questions, and I hope you will engage with me and answer some of those questions. And we're going to begin by just looking at a log. And I'm going to ask you, why are you here? I noticed someone asked if a certificate was going to be given, and that is a good thing to have. But what you're about to learn, I promise you, if you're in the oil and gas industry, you're going to run into these. Almost every position in the upstream oil and gas industry will eventually find themselves gathered around looking at a bond log, from drilling all the way to final production and abandonment of a well. So what you're about to see, I promise you, if you learn it, if you practice it, you will use it. Now, how we read one of these things, we'll take a look in a bit. The reason I know you're going to is because I've run into so many people in my career. I not only do cementing, I look at bond logs almost every day. And what you're going to find yourself in a position someday you're going to find yourself gathered around a table like these people. This happens to be my favorite television show. I know none of you has seen this television show, but it's a pretty good show, but I've only met a few people that have seen it. Now, I have the entire DVD series I can ship to you if you want to watch this show. It's about a family that lives in the country in the United States, and they lived during the Depression, and they didn't have a bond log. What I'm about to show you was invented in 1959. We ran our first bond logs in 59, 1960, and we still use very similar technology. But here are the people that are gathered around this table, and these are the kind of people that will gather around the bond log during your career. So I'm going to ask you very quickly, and I know you're not supposed to do this, but I'm going to ask you to judge a few of these people. I know we're not supposed to judge people, especially by their appearance, but I'm going to ask you to do that. These are people, they didn't have a bond log, they have a radio instead, but these are the people that will be gathered around the bond log. And you're going to walk into that room, and you're going to get engaged in some way with the bond log, and that's what we'll study today. So let me ask you just a few. Which person on here has the most experience? Which number? And I know you're not saying number 11. If I pull the chat feature down, which I would love to do because I see some of you answering the question, I don't want to block a future video of this, but I hope you've said number 9 or number 8. The least experience, of course, is number 10. Who hates the bond log? Who wishes we didn't have the bond log? The bond log costs money. It costs time. You will hear about the bond log. You can't trust it. It's hard to read. We're going to simplify the reading of a bond log. Who hates the bond log in this picture? Who's the one who doesn't like the bond log? I hope you've chosen number 8. This is the grandmother in this particular show, and she hates everything. She would surely hate the bond log. I'll ask you just a couple more. Who is the most unintelligent person in this picture? Who knows nothing about what's going on? Because you're going to get experienced people in that room. You're going to get people who don't like the bond log and are very cynical about trusting the bond log. You're going to get people that don't know anything. Although most of the young engineers, and you see some of them gathered around here, are smart and have energy. I don't know who you've chosen, but I think number 6 has not a clue what's going on. And finally, who is the smartest person in the room? This is a little tougher. Take a look at them. Who's the smartest? Some of you may have chosen 1 or 2, but they're managers and they may be smart, but they don't know the bond log. It's number 5. Look at him. He's focused. I think he's looking at a bond log, and he's going to give us the right answer. We're going to look at this family one more time before we interpret. And the other thing I will tell you is when you walk into a room to interpret the bond log, if you have experienced people, angry people, managers, young people, they're going to be noisy. There is a lot of talking. When you walk into the room, someone has already interpreted the bond log. And it's your job to know the bond log well enough to be able to quiet the room and get the right interpretation. Now, this is the actual people gathered around the bond log. This is actually a log that we're looking at in Colombia in South America. And so they're actually smiling because I'm taking their picture, but they were focused on interpreting this particular bond log. We're talking about sound waves. And when we talk about sound waves, what we're going to look at, I want to bring up a couple terms. You're going to hear several terms about the bond log, but I want you to think of ring like a bell would ring, and I want you to think of resonance. I want you to think of ring and resonance, and we're going to be looking at bond logs, and we're going to be listening for ring, and we're going to be listening for resonance. I'll give you one example, and this is the basics of the bond log. Here's a crystal glass. It's uncemented. There is no cement, and the bond log is going to tell us if we have cement or not. And so we're listening for sound waves, and if you hear sounds like this, that's ring. If I put cement around the casing or around the glass, no more ring. Something you may not be able to hear is that after the ring, I continue to hear sound. You may not be able to hear through the mic. It's an echo. It's a ringing. It's what we call resonance. Here's another way to explain it. This is an airplane. It happens to be Egypt Air. This is honoring Ahmed. But I live next to an airport in Lafayette. I don't think Egypt Air flies into Lafayette, Louisiana. But when an airplane does fly in, I know an airplane is flying by. Our house is located very close to the airport, and I can hear the sound of the airplane. That sound I call ring. It is a loud sound I hear with my ear, but I hear something else. I hear something else. I hear the ring, but I look over and I see my glass rattling. I see a vibration, and that is the resonance. So the sound waves that we are going to be looking at, I want you to think about ring. What we have in the middle here is a bond log, the CBL. It's based heavily on ring. The ultrasonic we'll see is we're looking at resonance. And we'll see that a little more clearly as we look at the bond log. Let's do a quick 5-minute review on what we're even looking at. It's the cement job. And here are the basics of cementing before we get into evaluating that cement job. When we drill a well, we pull the drill bit out of the hole, we run the casing, we will then circulate the hole to get it clean so that the cement can fill the hole. We pump a spacer down the casing. We drop a bottom plug that wipes the casing, and behind that, it also is separating the spacer from the cement. We pump the cement. We're going down the casing and up the annular space. We're mixing and pumping with a high pressure cementing unit. We're pumping through a cementing head. We'll look at that. And we're pumping it down the casing, up the annulus. Behind the cement, we drop a top plug. That top plug we will displace down the hole with a mud or a water. When that plug hits the top of a check valve, a collar there, which we call float equipment, the job is over. The plug can no longer travel, and the fluids cannot travel. We then open up the casing to make sure the check valve is holding and the cement doesn't come back up the casing. We then wait for the cement to set up, and we run a bond log, in many cases, after the cement has set. So we mix the cement. Here we are mixing some cement. This happens to be out in West Texas. We're pumping the cement through a cementing head, through a manifold of valves, through high pressure iron at the rig floor. We drop the bottom plug, B. we pump the cement on top of the bottom plug, and then we drop the top plug and we cement the well. We then displace that with fluid. We measure that fluid. This is water being measured at the unit by Halliburton, and we'll displace that cement down the well. We circulate down the well, up the annulus, and there we are taking cement returns back to, in this case, it's actually going into the cellar. That particular job was in the country of Oman. And then, what do? Cement is placed. I mentioned it before. What do we do next? What do we do after we place the cement? We wait. And we wait for that cement to set up, to get hard, to bond, so that we can run a bond log. Usually we will wait anywhere from 24 to 72 hours before we run a bond log, so that we have good cement that we are testing and checking out. At the end of the cementing operation, we hope it looks something like this. It would be great if we could go in and we could cut the well up and take a look at it, but we can't. But we hope we get something like this. Casing filled with cement between the formation and the steel casing. And we're going to run a logging tool right in the center of this casing, and we're going to send different kinds of sound waves out, and we're going to see what is behind that casing and in between the casing and formation. So here we are. It's funny because if you wanted to go take pictures of things, it would be nice if we could see a well bore. We don't. We get straight lines, crooked lines, different colors, different maps. And just looking at this, you're going to be confused if you've never seen one before. What am I looking at? And so we're going to break it down, the bond log and the ultrasonic log. So the CBL basics. Here is the bond log tool. The bond log tool is sending out a sound. It's actually a sound. If you have good ears, you can hear the sound. It's at a frequency of 20 kilohertz. But this tool, when you activate it, sounds like this. A very fast click. And it's being sent from a transmitter, activated. It's a crystal that is activated by an electric wire line, by electricity. And it sends out, from electricity, it sends out mechanical energy, sound. It receives that sound, it listens for that sound 3 feet away. It also listens for that sound at a receiver 5 feet away. And when it receives that compressional wave, that creates electricity, and the electricity is sent up to the logging truck, and we measure these sound waves in electrical energy, in millivolts. So we run the tool now in the middle of the well, and we want to find out what's on the outside of this steel casing. I'm showing one sound wave here, going from the transmitter down the casing to the 3 and 5 foot receiver, but actually the sound is going in all directions in a sphere of sound, and this path just happens to be the fastest path because it's traveling through steel, and sound will travel through steel faster than other materials. So the first thing we hear at the 3 and 5 foot receiver, we're listening for that ring. The first thing we hear is sound traveling down the casing. And if that sound is strong, we know there's no cement. If that sound is weak, we know there is cement. The problem is when the sound is kind of weak, but kind of strong, then you have to learn to really interpret. But we're listening for sounds with the bond log tool. If we have cement, those sounds will travel through the casing out into the formation. Now the sound traveling down the casing is weak. Why is it weak? All of the sound went out. It didn't go down the casing because we were connected by a solid. It's based on something called Snell's law, and when two solids are together, sound goes through them. When there's a solid and a liquid, the sound is reflected and stays in that casing. So here's the sound wave traveling. The first sound we hear, and up in the logging truck, we're looking at these waves on the oscilloscope. We're looking at electrical energy waves. And the first thing we see is the sound coming through the casing. And we're going up the well, so we're getting sound waves continuously at every depth. So at one depth, we get this sound wave. And the first part of the wave, we look at it, is sound coming through the casing. The second has gone through the cement, reflected off the formation, all through solids. And the final one is coming through the liquid inside the casing, down along the side of the tool itself, traveling through liquid, which is slower. So this is time you get casing, formation, and fluid, and we will use that to interpret the log. So here's the log. The great thing about the log, it is simple. There are only 5 curves to look at, and we really want to focus just on one curve. So what are the 5 curves? We have the dark line there on the left, and I'll break it down this way. This is where you can see the header. The dark line on the left, right down the middle, is the transit time. And we'll look more at the transit time in a bit. When we fire the sound, how long does it take to hear it at the 3-foot receiver? The green line is the gamma ray. We run a gamma ray. It just tells us the natural radiation of the formations. It tells us what is a shale and what is a sand or limestone. The other hashed line is the CCL, the casing collar locator. It is a magnet, basically, that's picking up large masses of steel at the collar connections where joints of pipe are connected. In the middle, and we won't get too advanced here, we'll get a little advanced when we look at interpretation, but in the middle is the amplitude. Now, if you've interpreted bond logs before, or if you've learned about them, you will find that most people interpret a bond log by looking at the amplitude. The amplitude is how loud the sound is of that first arrival that's coming down the casing. Is it the ring, or is it a very quiet sound? And I will tell you now, we at Therabond do not use the amplitude to interpret. We refer to it. We know it's there, but we will not use the amplitude. And we'll talk about amplitude a little more. Matter of fact, we have a rule at Therabond. Here's the rule. Don't hurt yourself when you apply this rule, but understand the rule. If you start to interpret the log and you look at the amplitude too long, maybe more than 5 seconds, you have to slap yourself. Not too hard, but just hard enough to get your eyes over on the final curve on the right, and that is called the variable density log. It is a depth versus time curve, and these are the actual waveforms coming in. Let's look at these a little more closely. The transit time is when we make the click to when we hear it at the 3-foot receiver in microseconds. For sound traveling down the casing, it should be the same up and down the well. You have the same fluid, the same casing, the same fluid. The sound wave should always arrive at the same time. That's if the tool is centralized in the middle of the well. The amplitude is the height, the strength of the first arrival. There it is. It's the height of that wave. It's basically how loud is the sound that we first hear. The variable density log, we get the one wave at one depth. We cut that wave in half. It's like being in the ocean at sea level, and the height of the wave there is the amplitude. And I'm looking at one wave. And I take that, we're going to color those waves a dark color, and we're going to look at just the peaks of those waves at one depth. But now we're going to look and take that and turn it on its side, where now we're not in the ocean, we're above the ocean looking down on the wave. And we're going to do that all along the beach or all along the depth of the well. We're going to map the peaks, the tops of the waves, and then we're going to connect them all. And when we connect them, it creates the variable density log. We will use the variable density log heavily to interpret logs when they're laid out before us on that table. Remember, when you are looking at the variable density log and you learn how to observe it, in that room, everyone else is going to be looking at the amplitude curve, and they're going to misinterpret again and again because they're looking at the wrong curve. The variable density log, every time you fly over the ocean and you look down, you're seeing a variable density log with the receiver at the beach, the transmitter out there, and here comes the wave in. The first wave that hits is that coming down the casing, which it would be straight if it were coming down the casing. So the next time you fly over the ocean, talk to your spouse or your friend and tell them, look down there, there's a variable density log down there on the ocean. And they will be very impressed if you tell them that. They'll be impressed for about a minute or two, then that's all. But you'll be impressed that the waves coming in, we see those on the map, and that's what the variable density log is. So here's the CBL. Let's quickly review. There are 5 curves. I remember the first time I saw one, I was on location. The company man, the well site supervisor, said, "Hey, Harris, here's a bond log. What do you think?" And what I really thought was, I have no idea what I'm looking at. I was a cementing person, and I didn't know how to judge the cement job. And you feel very foolish at that point, and you promise yourself you're going to learn the bond log. The great thing, there are only 5 curves. The dark line on the left, what is that? The dark line on the left. We have 3 curves on the left track. And different logs, they'll place them in different places. But this is very common to see. It's the gamma ray. The dotted line next to the gamma ray, if you can see that, it's straight in most places. What's the dotted line? It is the transit time. The hashed line, what is that? The hash marks. Next to this, we will use it to help us interpret. It's the casing collar locator. In the middle, there's another line there next to the depth. That's the wireline tension in pounds of pull. But then we go to the middle curve and we have the amplitude. We have 2 amplitudes here. One is called the amplified amplitude. It's on a scale of 0 to 10 millivolts. And then the other one is from 0 to 100. Same curves, but different scale. And then the final one on the right that we're going to use to interpret is, what is the track on the right? That is the VDL. Those are the 5 curves. That's all that's there to look at. Now you'll get all sorts of curves on some other logs, and you have to kind of, sometimes they'll run a couple different curves here and there, but these are the 5 basic you'll see all the time. When we look at the VDL, we want to identify the part of the VDL where the sound is coming down the casing. It's the first arrival, and we're looking for straight lines. Do you see any straight lines? We do not see any straight lines because there is no energy coming down the casing. This is a perfect cement job. The next part of the curve we look for are formation signals. We see the curvy lines because now we have differences in the formation as far as the speed of sound through them. And then we don't quite see them here, but you can usually see them, and those are the fluid arrivals. We have radial bond logs, and the only difference is a radial bond log, very quickly, is a bond log. That's the bond log. Those are 5 curves. And then we have 8 receivers, usually around the 2-foot or 3-foot receiver, that are listening for one side of the casing. And the amplitude is mapped out, so you get a map around the casing now, so that we're trying to pick up channels. And we see the cement map, which is a color-coded amplitude chart. In this case, we see the white. You see right down the bottom of the casing. This goes from the top of the casing down the bottom and back to the top. I'll show you some examples and what we look for when we look at CBL results. Here are some CBLs. We'll look at free pipe, and that means there's no cement. We'll look at a microannulus, which affects maybe 70–80% of the logs that you will see are affected by a microannulus. There is cement, but it's been debonded. We'll look at a channel, and that is where either mud or gas or water has come in or has been left behind when we did the cement job, and now we have a defective cement. And then we'll look at what we hope to see as cementers, and that is a perfect cement. This is free pipe. How do we know it's free pipe? All of the straight lines means the sound is coming from where? Where is the sound that we clicked and we're listening for? Where's that sound traveling through? They're straight lines. They're traveling down the casing. So you see those lines as we look at the VDL, those big straight lines. That's not good. What we also see on free pipe are these collar chevron patterns, we call them. Big ringing patterns. They are caused at joints where there's a slight gap between the steel joints. It distorts the response, and you get these big chevron patterns. For a microannulus, it's a little different. You don't always get the big chevron patterns, but you see the straight lines, first arrival. It's the first part of that VDL, straight lines. That's energy coming down the casing. That's not good. It means there's no cement. But it's not free pipe. In this case, it's just slightly bonded. You see a chevron pattern, but it's distorted and it's dampened. Whether this is a microannulus or a channel, because channels can look very similar, you have to use your interpretation skills, which we'll look at in just a bit. You also see those curved lines. What are those? Where is that energy coming from? This is the area where we pick up the reflections off of the formation. So we know we're connected to the formation. It must be cement, but why all the casing ring? Well, it's debonded, so it can still ring. It can still resonate. And we can find channels, and this is what they would look like. Once again, we have casing ring, first arrival. If you ever see that on a log, that's not good. You're going to be gathered around that table and people are going to be debating, what do I have? Well, we happen to know here because we get a radial log, and we know more about this well because this well actually flowed after we cemented it. You see the collars ringing. Now this could look very much like a debonded casing, but now we have the radial which shows, no, there's a really big channel traveling through that. I can pick up little pieces of formation, those crooked waves, but that big channel tells me what's going on. It happens to be connected to a water flow that we recognize in the well. And then perfect cement, no straight lines. A bunch of curves. It will look like the open hole sonic log, as if there was no casing in there. Beautifully cemented. That's what we want to see. Nice formation signals. All formation, no straight lines. This is the open hole sonic. This is without casing in the hole. That's what we want our bond logs to look like. The cement packed in, bonded to the steel, bonded to the formation so that sound waves travel through everything and just reflect off the formation. What about this one? See, we haven't even learned to interpret yet, and you're going to interpret this log. Do you think we have cement here? We know it's not really pretty because see all the straight lines? We don't want straight lines. We don't want straight line first arrival. We don't want casing collars shining like this or the chevron patterns. But what about this? What is this? They're not straight anymore. And this is where we have to interpret, and we're going to let you interpret a log in a bit, but when you see something like this, you have to start in interpretation. It's not so clear. If you look at the amplitude, it becomes more clear, and I told you not to look at the amplitude for more than 5 seconds, but you can look at it for 4 seconds and see that the amplitude is so high, it actually matches free pipe amplitude, as if there's no cement there. Each casing size has a certain free pipe amplitude that we expect. So we have to investigate further. When we interpret this, we ultimately find out all of the sound coming in at the same time. This is a time curve as well. Occurs at the same time. And what is happening here, these are the last things to arrive. Sound waves down the fluid that make straight lines distorted. So this is free pipe. I know this well, very, very well, and this is free pipe. Very quickly, before we look at interpretation, we're going to switch over and look at the ultrasonic log. This is a very useful log. This is the Schlumberger USET log, and people have different names for it, but it's a pretty good name because you can really use it. I receive into my office about 2 or 3 bond logs every week. And when I receive an ultrasonic log, I'm very pleased because I know it's going to help me interpret the log better. So let's look at the ultrasonic. The bond log is in the background. In the foreground here is our ultrasonic. It has a rotating head that hangs off the bottom of the logging tool. And now we're going to spin this tool around and we're going to check out all around and really look for channels. No longer the sound going in all directions or just listening in certain spots. We're going to go around and we're going to be able to pick up every 5 degrees what's behind the casing. Now this works differently. It's spinning 7.5 rotations per second. and it's sending a sound wave out, only this is a sound wave you cannot hear. It's an ultrasonic wave at 200 to 700 kilohertz. It's like taking a tennis ball, and I actually have never thrown a tennis ball online, and I don't think I will, but I'll act like I throw the ball, and I'm going to throw the ball against the wall, and I throw it, and then I catch it back. So I throw the ball, and I catch the ball back. I send from the same transmitter. The transducer becomes my receiver. So I pick up one sound wave, but what I pick up the sound wave, and I pick up the resonance behind that sound wave. Let's take a look at it. I'm taking it and I'm spinning it around, and I'm throwing the ball and I'm catching the ball. And when I get that resonance wave back, if it's dampening and getting quiet, there's cement. If it's loud, making a resonant ring, then there's no cement. It's a pretty neat tool. I throw and receive. I look at the first arrival, let's call that ring, and then I look at the resonance window. How is it resonating? How is the casing or the glass vibrating on the desk as the plane goes by? From that resonance window, I will gain something called acoustic impedance, which is the velocity of sound through a material multiplied times the density of the material. All matter on Earth has an acoustic impedance. And we're going to calculate what is right behind that pipe. So we take that sound wave, we take the resonance that's ringing between the casing, and look at the wave we get back to surface. We send it out and we get one big ring, and then we get a decaying or dampening resonance window. And from that, I can learn about the casing radius. We also use this as a casing inspection tool. I can learn about the casing condition, how it reflects off that casing. By how fast I get the resonance window, I can tell you how thick the casing is. And by how it dampens, I can calculate what's behind that casing. It is a highly processed wave, and I have thousands upon thousands of these waves that I'm picking up all around the casing. It's a great tool. This is what the log looks like. And I won't go through the entire log. At times you will get 38, 45 pieces of information on these logs. Sometimes I think they put all that on there just to confuse you, but we will use parts of it, and we will use parts of it to interpret the log correctly. First, we have an eccentricity curve. It can tell by checking all of the waves around if I'm centered in the well. There's an amplitude map. It tells me about the first arrival that reflects off the inside of the casing. If there's a hole in the casing, it will show up here. If there's residue on the inside of the casing, it will show up here. We get the radius of the casing. We can map the radius. We understand the thickness of the casing. We have a bond index, which graphically shows how much solid yellow, liquid blue, and gas red. And then we get the cement map. This is telling us what is just behind the casing. Is it high impedance cement, low impedance water or mud, or is it very low impedance, which would be gas? The reason we use this tool is to be able to look all around the casing and find these kinds of channels. What do you notice about this channel that I've circled? It's not a straight channel. And even if you poured water or a fluid onto your desk, Watch the pathway it takes. It will find the path of least resistance. It will meander like a river. And that's what we see here. This is a well leaking after the cement has been set. Between the casing and cement, we have a path, and we're leaking, in this case, probably gas through a water channel. Here's another picture of the ultrasonic. When we get good cement jobs, and this is a good cement job, we can actually see a picture. If you look on the right, that's a picture of the casing laying in the wellbore. The green is where the casing is touching the wellbore. We get a beautiful picture of what's going on. The only drawback that we continue to work on from a technology standpoint, we're just seeing just behind the casing. We're not picking out too far beyond the casing cement interface. Therefore, that gas channel that you see here, and this is a well that was abandoned in the Gulf of Mexico. The casing is not centralized, but we have a beautiful cement job except for a big mud channel and a gas channel that has flowed. This well had a gas channel for the life of the well. There was gas flowing through the surface that had to be managed. Currently, we do not have technology that would be able to find that gas channel, although we would be able to tell a channel near the casing. Okay, that's the basics of the bond log and the ultrasonic log. So how do we interpret them? Because what you see on those logs aren't always what you actually have. And we have to interpret the bond log. Let's show you how we do it. We do it by something called the 5 C's, and then we'll go through a practice interpretation after we go through the method. And remember, the 6th C is the coffee. If you're going to interpret, relax, spend 30 minutes, drink the coffee, you'll observe a lot of great things. If you drink 5 or 6 cups of coffee, you'll really see things. So, you know, somewhere between 3 and 4 cups is probably all you need to have. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to construct the well. We have a saying, let the well bore interpret the log before the log interprets the well bore. Another way to say it, if you pumped no cement into the well, then do not make an interpretation that says, I think I see cement in the well. It's not there. So constructing the well is very important. I'll show you a quick way to do that. Compare sections of the log. These logs are relative. A lot of ring, not much ring, no ring. We compare parts of the log. I'll show you how we do that. Where we have changes as we compare, we correlate. When we compare, we look up and down. When we correlate, we look left to right. Number 4, and this is the tricky one. In the world of cementing, where I come from, in the world of drilling, there are about 20 to 30 things that happen out there that confuse the log. We're going to look at a few of those, but this drives logging people crazy. My log says this. You're telling me my log is lying? No, I'm telling you the well bore has done something and he's trying to trick your log. So let's consider that. I'll show you the considerations we have. And finally, we conclude. At Therabond, we conclude by saying, here's what we got and here's why we got it. And to know why we got it, you have to know cementing. Okay, let's get back to the family. From the wisest to the dumbest. And remember one thing, you walk into the room, it's time to interpret. Are you ready? You better be ready because someone is going to be so loud, they're going to say, I've got the interpretation. They're going to be wrong. And you're going to say, wait a second. I attended a webinar and I don't think you know what you're talking about. I don't know if I would put it that way. But I would say let's quiet the room. It's too noisy. So before we start, let me ask a few questions. Here are 4 critical questions you need to ask on every log. If nothing else, it will quiet the room. Oh, wow, someone's asking a question. Let's see what the answer is. As we're asking these questions, what are we doing? We're constructing the well. Where was the cement supposed to be? You say it's a good bond log. What if I tell you we didn't pump any cement? Then you're going to change your interpretation. Did we have losses or flows? If we place the cement there, are we sure it's still there? An important one, do we have a weak bond? Maybe it's a microannulus. Just, I want to know, did we do anything that may have broken the bonds? And finally, if we have a problem, it's probably due to a formation. Formations take cement, they flow into cement. And so I want to know a little bit about the formation. So here's the well bore I have to construct, step 1. Here's an example of a log. What do you think about this log? The coffee is a necessity. Someone once told me you shouldn't drink so much coffee while you're giving a presentation. I really don't want to come watch you speak while you're drinking coffee. And I say, I have to. I'm sorry, we're looking at bond logs. Do you like this bond log? Is this a good cement job? We needed cement above this sand. This is our secondary production. Do I have cement? I have very high amplitudes. These are free pipe amplitudes. And then I got some formation, but it looks bad. A very big logging company came back and said, we have no cement. And I said, well, are you sure? The exploration department was not happy. Drilling, why didn't you cover this sand? I said, well, let's construct the well before we get too excited. Did you know that we only pump 35 barrels of tail and it perfectly matches here? I think what we have, I may be wrong, but as I construct the well, I think we have lead cement. Because as a cementer, I know lead cement sometimes gives us bond so poor, it could look like free pipe. So we construct the well, and I say, hold up, I think we have lead cement, but let's interpret further. I also am constructing the well bore. I'm looking at the lead tail cement. What else do I look at in the well bore? I look at the casing. It will affect my logs. I look at the formation on the gamma. It will affect my logs. I then compare log sections. That's pretty easy to do. I've got good down below. Even though I've got straight lines, that's not good. They're low amplitude. I've got strong formation. If nothing else, this is much better than this up here. So I compare those sections. And I kind of put a thumbprint or a fingerprint on those sections. I've got my tail and potentially my lead. My tail, my lead. That's what they look like. I then go to compare my lead with what may be free pipe. Compare those two. And this is where you use your skill of observation. Do they look alike? If they don't, there's a reason they don't. Look how much the top looks like free pipe. This is on the same log up higher where I expect free pipe. And look at my tail cement. I'm sorry, my lead cement down below. It looks different. If I were to compare the two, I'd say the upper is all straight lines. I get formation down below, and something's going on. We actually ran a temperature log on this well, and we found that this was lead cement. We found cement up higher. We're showing here at 5,500 feet. We found top of cement with a temperature log at 4,500 feet. But I compare that, and now I look for changes, and this is a different log, but we then correlate, step 3. So I do my comparison. I'm calling this good, bad, good. If for no other reason, look at all of my bright straight lines, and I have to figure out, why is this bad? And so I correlate. I correlate at the points of change, and you can see these as you observe. I say, let me correlate to here and here. And I find that I'm correlating to collars, to gamma, mainly. I could correlate if this were a cement change. It's not. I could correlate to my cement like I did before. Step 4, and then we're going to interpret a log. You are now almost an expert log interpreter. Here are 20. I could give you 35 key factors that affect the log, that drive the physicists a little crazy who have developed these great tools. I'm just going to show you a few, but here are the 20 top issues that affect the log. Let's look at a couple of those. The first is new casing. I'm showing here 62 millivolts amplitude. That is free pipe for 7-inch casing. And this happens to be 7-inch casing in a well in Qatar. This is in Qatar in the Middle East. The VDL shows a lot of bad cement, but it shows some formation signals, straight lines and crooked lines. What's happening here? We did 4 wells like this with new shiny casing. Shiny casing does not bond to cement and can give you a bad bond log. We have to consider that. So what do? We sandblast the casing, make it rough, no longer shiny, and look what happens. Here we do it for a couple joints of casing, and the straight lines go away. New casing can confuse the bond log. That's one consideration I always make. Lightweight cement. The lighter cement, the more the casing will ring. When I hold this glass to stop the ringing from occurring, I can't do it, barely touch it. It still has some ring to it. I have to hold it tight, and I do that with stronger cements. So lightweight cements will affect the bond log. It confuses the bond log. Here's another one that confuses for the good. This is an uncemented well, but we have shale that has swelled and has collapsed around the casing and is now providing bond probably better than cement. So we have to understand that shales bond good, sandstones bond poorly, and they try to confuse the bond log. We have to consider them. Here's a big one. This has affected so many wells around the world. When we pressure test casing, we tend to stretch the casing and relax it. We start to break the bonds. The bond log on the left, do you see any straight lines? Look for those straight lines. We have the gamma, hard to see the transit time, the casing collar locator, the amplitude, the amplified amplitude, and the VDL. Maybe a little line here, but this is a good bond log. All we've done is pressure tested it to 3,000 PSI. We rerun the bond log and look what we get. Straight lines. We have broken the bond. Now, if I run the log after I pressure test, I think I may have no cement or a bad channel, when in fact I just have a confusing log due to lack of bonding. These are the kind of considerations that we have to make. Look at these 2 logs. Another consideration is cement shrinkage. When cement sets, it will tend to shrink during the hydration process. So we put expansion additives in to make that bond tight. Look at the log on the right. That's a great cement job versus the log on the left. It's not bonded well. Something more important than that. You got a beautiful bond log on the right, but we have 15 wells like this and they are not leaking gas. We have 30 wells like that one on the left, the bad one, and they're leaking gas, they're percolating gas. They look like this. I don't know if you can see it, but this is gas percolation. We call it a vent flow. It is occurring between the surface and intermediate casing because of poor bonding. That's all that's happening. Number 5, it's only 5 steps, and it leads you to good, accurate interpretations. You have to conclude. You know, when you're in that room and it's noisy, I don't know if you've experienced this either in your work or in classes, but someone usually speaks loudly and speaks too soon. And you, maybe being technical, you want all the data, so you're not saying a word, you're just collecting the information. I'm going to think about this. And you're not saying a word. You don't want to be wrong. And you're a bit introverted. You're not going to be loud. You're not going to say, I know the answers, everybody be quiet. You're going to be thinking, gathering all the data. But remember this, you're going to have colleagues who are going to be loud. And they're going to say, I have the answer. And if you say nothing, if you're still thinking, it's probably better to speak up and be wrong than to never say anything. So we have to conclude. Sometimes we have to conclude with little information. Hopefully we have more information. Understand this. This should be helpful. These are the only 8 choices in the world of oil and gas cementing that you get. There are some good things that can happen. You can have good cement bond, or as we saw with the shale, maybe it's not cement, maybe it's shale. Good geologic barrier, a shale bond. Do I have zonal isolation or not? I don't know for sure. It might be a weak bond, but still zonal isolation. It may be one of those microannulus we talked about, the debonding. Or maybe you're going to have a great bond, but the cement just needs a little more time. Maybe you have to wait on cement longer. Those are questionable. The bad results are you have no cement at all the cement was lost, or you didn't lift it high enough, or you're flowing from one zone to the next. You have cross flow. Or you have channeling that channels all the way to surface, or maybe it's mud left in the hole that now is providing a leak path, and now you're losing production, or you have poor well integrity because of channeling. Those are your only 8 choices. And we got to pick one of those, but we also have to understand why. And then we can make our conclusion in our final step of interpretation. Okay, are you ready to interpret a log? And we'll spend the next 10 or 15 minutes allowing you to interpret. That gives me the chance to be quiet, to finish my coffee, and to let you be the interpreter. So we're in the room, we lay the log out, and here it is. I'm only showing you a section of the log. You walk into the room, it's noisy. What's the first thing you're going to do? What is the first thing you're going to do? You're going to smile, you're going to be friendly and nice. What is the first thing? Think about the interpretation method. What's the first thing we're going to do? I have to take a peek at the chat. There we go. We're going to construct. We're going to construct the log. Yeah, I feel when I see the chat box, I'm with a good bunch of interpreters, so thank you. We're going to construct the well. Not the log, the well. So that's what we're going to do. I can tell you the first thing I'm going to do. How am I going to construct it? What's the first thing I'm going to do? It will help quiet the room as well. What will you do? Because you know what happens? What happens is that you go in and you don't have all the information. Often we're asked to interpret the log without sufficient information. You just get the log. Here's the log. I remember receiving this log. It landed on my desk and they said interpret the log. I knew nothing about the well. So what do we do? I don't know if you've ever used the chat feature on Zoom, but if you use the chat feature, you can send me a note and tell me what the answer is. We're going to, because I see the hands being raised, we're going to ask the 4 questions. Let's ask those 4 questions. We're going to get to your point, Marwa. We're going to get to your point because that's an important one of where is the interest zone or the zone of interest. We're going to ask those 4 questions. Where was there a lead and tail? This is to quiet the room and to construct the well. We're going to construct it first. Yes, there was a lead and a tail, and we'll talk about the log scales in a bit. Thank you. Well, there was a lead and a tail, but this is all tail. This is all good tail cement. Were there losses or flows? No, there was not. Okay. What about the casing? Is there a reason that the casing might be debonded? Not that we can think of is the answer, but look at the log. A lot of the casings are bonded, but I'm still thinking that maybe some of the casing joints debonded. And what about the formation of interest? And the drilling engineer told me, I'm not sure. Just can you please interpret the log? And sometimes that's what you get. And the log scale, the only log scale I would say that we need to know at this point to interpret this log is the amplitude there in the middle is from 0 to 100 millivolts. This is 5.5 inch casing. So free pipe, although we don't see it here, free pipe should be out here at 72 millivolts. But once again, listen to me, we don't look at that amplitude. For 4 seconds is all you get. We construct the well. What do we do next? After we construct the well, Mohamedou says it. Thank you, Sagnit. We compare. So let's do it very quickly. This small section is easy to compare. You've got good, you've got bad, and you've got good. We want to know, why is it bad? Is it bad, first of all, really, or is it just looking bad? And why is it bad? That's where our interpretation needs to take us. Do you think we have cement here? Just looking at this, do you think we have cement? When I look at it, I say yes, I think we do. But now I have to do the interpretation. And so let's keep looking. What do we do after we compare? This is where we get into the heart of interpretation. Comparing is sitting back and looking up and down the wellbore. That's where you have the coffee, you relax, and you look up and down the wellbore. Where is it changing? Where is it changing? And you mark those spots. This part of the log was quite evident. This is our problem section. And so that's why we're looking at it. I like this. I'll put on my glasses and check who said this. Habib says new casing joints may have caused bad cement in between. You are going to be a very good interpreter. Now, I'm not saying you're right, but that was my first thought as well. But let's do our next step. It is, Laura Bell mentions it, so does Dan. Let's correlate. To correlate, I'll just draw a thinner line. Instead of up and down, we look side to side. And I have to understand how important these correlations are. Do you see where we correlate? We want to correlate back to the wellbore. That's formation, casing, cement. Remember I said all of this is tail cement. So there's no correlation to be done there. So I look at casing. Habib, you might be onto something. Do I correlate to casing or do I correlate to formation? This is where correlation becomes very important. When you learn to interpret logs, you will correlate all over the place. You'll start solving and piecing the puzzle together. And to be honest, it's a lot of fun. Where am I correlated to? Maybe this will help. We also had, thank goodness, an ultrasonic for this log. So we just kind of started interpreting the CBL. Now let's go to the ultrasonic. Sometimes when you get the ultrasonic, you don't get the full log. I wish we always did, but sometimes we just get the map. And the gamma and the casing collar locator correlate for me. Does the change occur at the casing collar? If so, Habib, I think you're on to something big. And I'm right there with you. Or do we correlate to the formation? Which is it? What do you see? At this point in the interpretation, you have quieted the room. But I don't want this room to be that quiet right now. Where are we correlating to? We have the casing collar locator. You can see the casing collars here, the black lines. Over here is the gamma. Do you see the gamma? Am I correlating to the collar or the gamma? Correlating to the formation. Thank you, Ayush. We're correlated to the formation. Let's look back at this log. Look here. Look what we correlate to. You see the gamma spike? What is that? What is that gamma spike? I'm correlated to it. I thought I was correlated to the casing when I first saw it because remember, 70–80% of bad bond logs are poor bonding. 30% are poor cement jobs. So I'm always thinking bonding. Habib was thinking bonding. I like that, but it's not always the case. Is that a shale? Looks like a shale to me. The problem is shales bond good. Only Marwa, I'm not sure it's a shale. So let me go to the drilling engineer and I say, what is that? And he says, looks like a shale. I said, yeah, it does, but what is it? He said, I don't know. Let's go talk to the geologist. So we go talk to the geologist. In oil companies, the geologist or petrophysicist usually is the go-to person for bond logs. They are familiar with the bond log. They're familiar with cased hose sonic and open hose sonic, and they're your go-to people. They also know the formations, and formations affect logs all over the place, up and down. So if you do not know a geologist, get to know one. Buy them lunch once every month. Be a friend with a geologist. If you're a geologist, you need to also find a friend so they will buy you lunch. I go to the geologist, he says that is a hot dolomite. It's a dolomite. It's a hot dolomite. This is all carbonate, but we have a few little hot dolomites where we have injected CO2 into, and now we have radioactive hot dolomite scale that's being picked up. He said, I'll tell you more about this formation, Kirk. He said, do you know that we are injecting into that formation right now? That formation is probably 200 psi overpressured with CO2 injection. I go to check. You know what I find out? While we were cementing, we were injecting into that formation in offset wells. I now am no longer thinking about, I'm thinking about the well bore. This may be no cement at all here. Look at that. It's being washed out. I have no cement from the gamma. I may have a big problem. Knowing cementing, understanding crossflow, I now know that I have crossflow between a hot dolomite and a normally pressured fractured dolomite. And I've wiped my cement job out. That becomes my interpretation. Am I right? Am I wrong? I don't know. That's my interpretation. That's as far as I can see what you're seeing. But I've got the construction, the comparison, I correlate, I considered the casing being the problem, but I have to conclude. So we go in and we perforated right here, and we perforated up here, and we circulated at 8 barrels per minute. We had pure circulation all the way back to surface. We did a circulation squeeze and we sealed off that area. In the next 2 wells, now that we know what had happened, we actually used an external casing packer to cement those wells. Take a look at this. Here was well 1. We just interpreted that. Look at well number 2. This is pretty cool. Well number 2, we put a packer in there because we didn't want crossflow. We need those to be separated because this is controlling our injection profile. So well 2, do you see on the ultrasonic? You can even see where the packer is. Oh, it's a beautiful cement job. This right here is that other fractured, we can even see the fractured dolomite. We do the same thing on well number 3. On well number 4, we made sure everything was normally pressured and we cemented it without a packer. But do you see what we've done? We didn't say good or bad, here's your log. We said, here's why, now let's look how to correct the next well. That's the beauty of the bond log. We're not just going to analyze a well, we're going to fix a well. After we fix a well, we're going to cement the next well better. So when you run into somebody who says, you can't trust bond logs, I don't like bond logs, when you run into the grandmother that says, I hate them, understand they are extremely useful. And it's very, very beneficial for you to learn the bond log. We'll close with just a quick story. This is out in West United States, out in Arizona. My son, he likes to hunt animals. I hope that doesn't offend anybody, but he likes to hunt the deer. I don't do that. I don't have a gun or do any of that, but he likes to. And so he goes out and he's out looking for an animal, a deer, and he never can see them. He says it's very difficult. I can't find any animals to hunt. So he goes out with an expert hunter, and the expert finds the deer. Here's my son right now looking down at a deer. I can't see it. He can barely see it. But the expert says, there it is. And my son, Seth, he said to the expert, I've been out with you several times. I can't see anything. How can you see them? Am I blind? And the expert said, no, you're not blind. You're just inexperienced. I know where to look. I've done this for so long. I know where to look. I know how to look. I know how to see the changes. When you go through interpretation, you have to keep at it and keep practicing. And there's a wonderful market where oil companies and service companies need your services to be able to interpret these logs. And so he said, keep looking for the deer, and you will start seeing it. The same is true with the log, and I close with this. This is a copy of a bond log on the left and ultrasonic on the right. When I look at a log, I try not to see, and I often don't see, the crooked lines, the straight lines, the colors, the patterns. What I see as I look at the log, I see the well bore. That's what I want to see. I want to see the cemented well. And here we have it. And I show in this slide 20 places that I look to find certain things. Because I've looked at thousands of logs, we see the same things on log after log. And we learn the tricks of the trade, how to observe the deer in the brush. We learn how to observe. For example, when I go to number 5, I look for that. I look for dark spots to know what my casing condition is. When I look at number 2, up there in the upper left-hand corner, I know that at a previous casing, I will be given some signals on if I have cement or no cement at the previous casing. And so I encourage you, as we close, I encourage you to keep looking at the logs. And the more you look and the more you start understanding why the patterns you see are the way they are, the better you'll get at it. I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about the basics, but also the method we used to interpret the logs. If you have any questions, I will now pass it over to our moderator. Thank you.
So thank you, Engineer Harris, for this informative and distinctive lecture. I'll begin by the questions. So the first question is that, can we calibrate tools in double cage, and how calibration in double cage affects the CBL or ultrasonic?
Great question. It's about the calibration of the tools. What we normally will do, I was visiting the Schlumberger shop recently, they will function test the tool to make sure the transmitter and receivers are working. There are some companies that can calibrate in the cell, but things change with pressure and things change with different casings. Often we do the calibration, we won't call it calibration, we'll call it normalization in a free pipe section in the actual well that's being run. And so we'll do some calibrations on site. Each company is a little different. I was looking at some logs recently in the North Sea, and these are old logs, and they're uncalibrated logs. So the amplitudes are too high and some things, but we can still interpret the logs, because as long as that tool is centralized and the tool is functioning, although I don't have absolute correct numbers, I can compare parts of the log. So even poor calibration may not stop us from interpreting. Most are normalized on location, but definitely several tools are calibrated in the calibration well at the various sites.
Okay, thank you. Another question is that, if there is cement and severe washout, how bond to formation appear as a function of tool depth of investigation?
Well, these are good questions. Yeah, when you have washout, and often you'll see a washout, for example, right past the previous casing. You'll get a washout that was in a rat hole area or in that zone. You'll see the formation signals slowly disappear just because of the borehole size. If you see formation disappear, you're either washed out or you do not have bond to that formation, or it's a shale. The shale has come in and now there's no formation to go to because the formation is already there. So in washouts, we can pick it up by watching when the formation arrivals change, and we do that quite often. It's a good question. But we see
Okay.
washouts on that VDL.
Thank you. And finally, the last question is that if shale swells and washouts mainly occur at all this type of formation, why does it make it a good bond while sands, which are considered more stable or has higher strength, but make it a bad bond?
Boy, if there was a question of questions, that's the question. Excellent question. From the shale standpoint, although you can wash out shales, think about even oil-based muds where you don't wash out the shales. But when the shales are coming in, they're coming in. So the bond is good because they are packed around the casing. There's no longer a washout. They have actually collapsed, swelled, and are wrapped around the casing. Matter of fact, they are pretty good bonding materials because they reconstitute themselves once you break the bond. You break a cement bond, it may last forever. The shale will reconstitute and heal itself. The reason the sands are bad are for two reasons. One, fluid influx coming in. It's real. I've seen many bad bond logs and many bad cement jobs because the hydrocarbon comes in and contaminates the cement. The other reason is because they're porous quite often, and you have cement around the casing, but around the cement you have formation. And if it's solid rock like a limestone, great bond. If it's porous, then it's poor bond. We often also see channeling in sands, so they look bad, but the shale next to it has collapsed and there's no more channel. So that's why we get sands are bad, shales are good on most logs that we look at. Great question.
Okay, so thank you, Engineer Harris, for this informative session. And I want to highlight that this session was being recorded and it will be uploaded on PioPetro's YouTube channel. And also we will be holding also webinars and short courses for the upcoming months. So please visit the Arab Oil and Gas Academy Facebook page to check the schedules of the webinars and along with the topics which will be presented. And please try to register before the deadline. Now, I hope you have a nice day and see you in future webinars. Thank you.
Thank you very much.